And the only reason I don't
Wow, one glass a week. Why bother?
All right, let's get things going. Can you hear me right there?
Yeah. Loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. I'll just turn the speakers up at our end. So how about this? I'll just give you a little bit of an intro because I don't totally know what you've been up to. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a moment. I just want to say, so Tama Whitting, he was a former classmate of mine back from VUW, and I still remember being very impressed with just his incredible design sensibilities and just complete willingness to kind of just like try, fold in Mataranga Māori and this knowledge into his designing back then. And I'm just really excited to kind of see where he's taken that in the last few years. Have to admit, I haven't really caught up with him since then till now. So everything here is, I'm going to be learning it as you're learning it. So how about I hand the reins over to you, Tama, and then the show's yours.
Yeah, cool. I'll just share my screen if that's okay.
Go for it.
All right, everyone. So can you see my screen?
Yep, that's all good. Go for it.
Cool. So kia ora, everyone. I'm Tama Whiting, as mentioned by Sean. I work for SCAPE in New York. And today I'm going to be sharing a brief on a project that I'm working on that's based in New Zealand. But I guess I'll just start off with just giving a bit of a background on our practice as a whole. So SCAPE, you've probably heard of them if you're based in Virginia. We're landscape architects, but we also employ architects, urban designers, urban planners, and horticulturists. So our team is pretty diverse makeup with about 90 full-time employees. We have people from all different backgrounds, religions, you name it, we have it. And we're kind of spread over 3 different locations currently. So we have an office in NOLA in New Orleans. Our head office is in New York. And then we have just opened up an office on the West Coast in San Francisco. And then obviously I'm based in, well, it's not obvious, I'm based in Sydney, Australia. So I work remotely for this firm. So here's just a kind of brief overview of some of the projects that we work on. So we play a lot with different scales, everything from large regional master planning down to small parks and plazas, I guess. Yeah. So kind of the ethos behind SCAPE is we're very eco-aware. We're very systems thinking focused, so we like to work with regenerative systems that kind of tap into also like social resilience as well as like the physical resilience of a landscape. We like to have the community engaged, and we're super collaborative. Hence the reason why we've taken on this project in New Zealand, which I'm going to share soon, is because our boss Kate is really interested in learning more from kind of like the indigenous groups and the way they treated the land. I think it really aligns with our kind of ethos as landscape architects of working with the land rather than against it. So the project I'm going to be sharing with you today is called Te Ara Tukutuku. Te Ara Tukutuku means the binding of land, sea, and people. And it's actually a metaphor for like a waka ramp or like a canoe ramp. Waka means canoe. So this site is located within the Auckland Harbour, and Auckland is the largest city in New Zealand. And its proximity in the harbour is kind of fitting for the name that was chosen for it. So a bit of a background, these top right images kind of show the current condition of site. It's kind of just like a blank slate at the moment. But if we look at this map, oh, whoops, you can kind of see the original shoreline of the city. So all the stuff in the gray is reclaimed land, which is essentially the whole city is built on reclaimed land. And you can see that the kind of water's edge that kind of hugs the shoreline is very linear and very it's mostly just wharf structures, right? So again, yeah, Te Ara Tukutuku is a name used for walker ramps, and this name was gifted to us by a conglomerate of First Nation representatives of this particular area. So that was kind of like the first step in us engaging with some of the local tribes and making sure that they felt a bit of buy-in in this project from the get-go. So in order for this project to take place, it's probably been something that's been in the works for about five years prior. So there's been a lot of different kind of documents and guidelines and studies that feasibility studies that have taken place prior to this to our team coming on board. Some of these documents have been developed by that working group, that Indigenous working group. So yeah, I'll just kind of jump into our design team. So our design team is kind of like a mashup of a few different firms. So we kind of fall under this logo, which is Toi Waihanga, which is our collective. So we're made up of us. LandLab is local landscape firm.
We lost you there for a second, Tama. You might have to reshare your screen.
Oh, did you? Oh. Sorry, it said we are recording this and then it kicked me off. Okay. Anyway, the team is made up of a few different players. We've got engineers, we've got landscape architects, which us being the international landscape architect, LandLab being the local landscape architect. We have a placemaking team that are part of this, and then a project delivery specialist and kind of build media, which are producing like renders and 3D models at like a city scale. So they basically got the whole city of Auckland modeled to like, yeah, it's pretty incredible. If you're interested in kind of cityscape 3D models, then check out Build Media's website. It's pretty amazing. So typically a project is kind of split into four phases. So you've got concept design, schematic, develop, design, and then construction documentation. So what we did with this project is a little different in that we added 2 phases to the beginning of this project. And so these 2 beginning phases are where we have included, you know, the Indigenous, I guess, working group or steering committee from the get-go. So they're involved from this first phase, which is called discovery and interpretation. And I'll just show you a little bit of what that looks like in terms of a phase. So the discovery and interpretation phase is basically a series of workshops where each workshop is broken into a cultural brief, procedural brief, functional, environmental, emotional, and then we have a summary workshop. And so each of these workshops basically facilitate the conversation where we're opening the room just to listen to some of their stories, to some of their wants and needs. So here's just a breakdown of a day. This is the cultural brief. And so what we learned here was basically the types of spaces that are inherent to their culture, or like the practices that they may have once used, like traditional practices. So there was a real need for wanting to recreate or emulate that kind of headland aspect, which is a bit more natural. And given the site's location within the harbour, wanting it to be really prominent and to try build up a bit of land form there. There was also a mention of whare which is basically a canoe housing structure, I guess, or boathouse, so that the Indigenous groups can basically host activities within this park space. And so we were able to develop these different components, right? And basically really in this phase, basically get everything on the table that they would like, rather than starting concept design and trying to, you know, pull that out of them through various different designs, presentations. So as part of this kind of phase as well, you know, it was a really collective journey. So a lot of our meetings kind of look like this, where we all sat around the table together. We tried to set it up pretty informal. So you're sharing cups of teas, coffee. You know, there's food about. There's a bunch of things stuck up on the wall. There's post-it notes, and we really encourage people who might not come from a design background just to be involved, to ask questions, and to just to write whatever they thought were thinking at these different workshops. We did a lot of site walks. So I think what's really important about collaborating with Indigenous groups is making sure you're present in person, being able to, I guess, like shut up when needed, right? It's all about listening and um, trying to be, what's the word? Engaged in a way that is not just turning up with a final sketch of, hey, we're an outsider, we're coming to your land, and this is what we think you guys should do. It's more about accepting that, you know, there's these older traditions or ways in which they work the land from previous ancestors or generations that, you know, we're coming to learn the stories of the land and try to reinterpret that with our design backgrounds. So the next phase is vision and framework. And so this is basically taking some of those components that we identified and starting to place them on a map. So we developed, you know, in this phase, some key moves, some key strategies or approaches that we wanted to employ on this particular project. We talked about the headland just before, so they're wanting to build up some of the grading on site to be able to, you know, reinterpret the headland form that was further set back from the city. We're wanting to re-engage the coastal edge, so trying to get people down to the water level. I talked about this before, that the whole coastline of the Auckland city is basically just wharf structures and piers. So we're wanting to break that kind of linear and kind of urban fabric to be able to engage with the water's edge. Urban stitch, so we're wanting to create these strong accesses that help people connect to our site from the city. So we set up basically a north-south axis that connects through to, you know, public transport networks. But then we also have this kind of horizontal axis that connects people from the sunrise to the sunset. So thinking about how the site might operate from a social perspective. And then obviously uh, that what comes with all of that is then identifying spaces where you have particular program or activated zones. kind of another approach that we had to develop in this vision and framework phase was how does the site evolve over time? So we broke this into kind of this framing of now, soon, and eventually. Now being, you know, within 2 to 3 years, what happens on the site? How are people engaged? And how do we keep the public kind of a part of this journey? Soon being 5 plus years, where we're starting to kind of form the land. Uh, that's where you start breaking down some of the edges of site to create those coves and kind of coastal walkways. You're starting to, you know, use some recycled dredge from that activity to then build up this landform and to recreate some of those headlands. So you can see there's like 3 kind of mounded areas that are kind of reminiscent of they almost look like oyster shells in terms of the grading. Um, and then eventually being 10 plus years, you know, how does this site then become thriving? How does some of the vegetation take foot, and how do people engage with the site? So we really broke that down, and this is just a really quick snapshot. This is obviously was like 100-page document, but I only have a short time to share this with you guys. So one of the narratives that we developed was this hoe narrative. Um, so hoe is basically like a paddle in Māori culture, and we wanted to kind of reinterpret or use some of the the identifying pieces of a paddle to try to um, help us with structuring some of our open space zones. So here's a couple of the zones, just a basic kind of bubble diagram. Um, you have this marine restoration zone on this kind of northeastern side. So we're deleting some of the existing wharf structures that exist here. I think I forgot to mention that the site was a heavily industrialized area. So it used to be um, home to like petrochemicals. Companies such as Shell, Mobil had huge tankers on this land. So the land is contaminated, heavily contaminated. Hence the reason why we had that now, soon, and eventually, is because some of that time frame is actually to do with remediation of the land and getting that land and that soil up to scratch to be able to inhabit. Um, yeah, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. I probably don't need to go through each particular zone. But you can kind of see here, there's an area that's marked out for development. And I guess another portion of this project will be taking each one of these parcels and then developing that with architects or putting it out to bid. But each of those architects are going to have to collaborate with that Indigenous working group. So you'll start to see some of these structures and these built forms starting to take form, shapes, or patterns that are derived from some of those local stories or practices, like traditional practices. And you're probably thinking also, well, how do you see Indigenous design within this? I think a lot of people get confused with kind of like tokenism, right? Like it's pretty apparent in the Western world that if we do collaboration with Indigenous groups, that there must be like a visual representation of some sort of pattern or like a po or something, which is basically like a totem pole. Yes, there might be instances where we have things like that within the park, but the actual collaboration of working with indigenous peoples is to have the principles and values come through, right? So we're talking about identifying spaces that work for them. Um, they were really clear on having a project that was focused on sustainability, um, respecting nature. So that's why we have a marine restoration zone. It's basically a marine nursery. They talked about wanting to seed and grow their own trees and plants for the site. So we're setting up in that 2 to 3 year period, which is now, on-site nursery. The coves and kind of this breaking that edge that we talked about, that's really about trying to restore the land to not necessarily what it used to be, because this used to be out in the isthmus, but restoring the land to kind of be reminiscent of what the original coastline might have looked like. So all of these kind of different approaches are basically all informed by the kind of Indigenous working group and things that they want for the site. So here's just a quick kind of render of what the coves might look like. So you can see it's really has that naturalistic look, even though it's man-made. We're trying to really break down that edge and get people to engage with rock pools and stuff, which would be made out of like mudcrete. And if you're not familiar with mudcrete's basically recycled dredge material that can kind of harden and you can kind of mold it and shape it in a way that looks natural. This is the plaza area, so making sure there's spaces that can be used for cultural events and ceremonies, I guess. And then, yeah, just quickly, this is the kind of vision for site. So this is just the vision and framework phase that I'm presenting to you. So now we're jumping into concept, which only started 3 weeks ago. So we're going to take, even though it looks quite refined, there's still many areas that we have to investigate and try to get into the nitty gritty. So we have a few phases to work through. But I guess adding these 2 phases at the start really helped us to kind of hone in on particular elements that this First Nations group wanted to use for site. And I think it's been really fruitful, because it's not like you're getting through concept or a few other phases and then realizing, oh, you know what, we have to include some Indigenous input and just plonking a few totem poles around site. It's really a holistic approach and really integrated. So yeah, so this is kind of us now doing all these things, marine trials. We're testing out different shellfish that might be used in the marine nursery. We've got our nursery up and running, so plants are beginning to be grown for site and will be planted in 5 to 10 years. The bioremediation has begun, and Shower and Mobile are actually tasked with removing as much as they can of some of their I guess pollutions. And yeah, we're continuing conversations with the local Indigenous groups. So that's all I've got for this particular project to share today, but hopefully that was kind of insightful maybe. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
I've got one to start you off, Tama, and like might hopefully kind of lead on to some others, maybe from the students. But how has SCAPE's design practices or processes changed, or have they changed after? I guess I'm guessing this is their first involvement with Indigenous peoples, or at least Southern Hemisphere Indigenous peoples. Have those processes changed at all, and how?
Like, do you mean have we changed, or just in general?
So there's a very different like community engagement model working with Māori. You're doing the huis and the that kind of thing. Is that kind of influenced how practice and so the regular North American projects unfold?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good question. I guess one of the reasons we took on this project in New Zealand was because Kate was really interested in kind of amplifying those voices within North America. but there's kind of no projects or developers really out there that are that invested in doing that, because obviously a lot of people in America want to see the return, right? And it's hard to prove a return on something that hasn't been done before, or hasn't been executed as well as it could have. So one of the reasons we took on this project in New Zealand was because the developer is it's a private public partnership, so and they're kind of mandated by law to bring on an indigenous group. So it's kind of set in stone in New Zealand, and it just seemed like a good opportunity to create something new and exciting. I guess with the changing times in terms of climate change and having to be adaptable to the different weather patterns that we're now experiencing. It seemed like a great opportunity, especially for SCAPE's kind of background working in resiliency work, that this would be the next logical step, right? Is to have a project where we're learning from traditional custodians or owners of the land to help also inform that narrative of what is a resilient landscape. Because we can bring all our knowledge and our technical expertise from the kind of functional or technical prowess, but we don't really have. I think what was of interest was how do we create a narrative around that? How do you make the design speak for itself in a way that kind of connects with that social fabric and not just be a seawall that protects you from king tides or large waves or something. So, and I don't know if that answers your question, but in conclusion, it's basically we wanted this project to be a catalyst to then inform other projects that we might take on in North America. So once this project is complete and having kind of worked out this process, working with Indigenous peoples, and then being able to show this is a direct output of having consulted with this group, and it's amazing and it has this strong narrative. We're then able to take that kind of presentation and show it to people in North America and be like, hey, this is what you should be doing with Indigenous people and within your own country, because look how rich it is, look at etc. etc.
So you guys, any questions?
Curious whether or not that process had already been kind of institutionalized or framed up, and then SCAPE then kind of adapted, or was this so it was a learning thing for SCAPE, or was it more of a collaboration and kind of figuring out that framework in the beginning?
Yeah, the latter. So it wasn't a framework that has necessarily been tried and true in New Zealand as of yet. There's been a few projects where they have collaborated with Indigenous groups, but it hasn't been to this extent where they've essentially added these two new phases at the start. So yeah, that was developed in that kind of working group of our conglomerate, which was the international team, which is us, the local landscape architects. Like we all came together and kind of tried to work out what does this process look like, and what could we get from these additional phases.
Talk a little bit about the relationship of the First Nations people to the site. Like, did they own the site, or is this just done out of respect that at some point they did own it? Do you think they're going to be using the site, or?
Yeah. So they don't own the site. They used to own the site once upon a time, but obviously through colonization, they were displaced from land and stuff. But I guess given this day and age, the government has kind of reconciled that a little bit and recognized the original custodians of the land. So that worked into part of the process, right? Hey, we need to acknowledge that, you know, this land was home to people before, and we need to include them in the design process. Um, they do intend to use the land, and I guess a component maybe I didn't quite explain too well in my presentation was that this park is not just a park where you kind of design it, you build it, and people just recreate in it. There's a lot of components within this park that are supposed to be a working kind of park. So you have that nursery, right? You have this is a workplace for people. So they intend for at least 10 people to be operating that on-site nursery. Um, we have a marine nursery also on site, or that marine restoration zone. So that's intended for reusing some of the wharf piers for growing mussels to help filter the water, but also to develop marine trials and stuff for some of the local university to engage with the like next generation um, of children in the area. So involving local schools to develop their own curriculum that are associated with the park. Um, I guess similar to like maybe the Highline Network, you know how they've set up that kind of branding and it's basically its own entity. That's the kind of intention of this park is that it becomes that it has its own non-profit that then has people working and being present on site, yeah, participating.
What part of connecting the clients of the site is most valuable? Like when you're connecting people to the ecosystem or maritime industry?
Like, do you mean?
What are you trying to get out of your user experience? Like when you're connecting those people to ecosystem, like what do you want them to feel? How do you want them
Okay, okay. Yeah. Okay, so probably the biggest thing is like a sense of belonging. So having that kind of ownership over site. We want people when they come to this place to feel like they should be caring for the land, right? So being able to see a landscape that is living, you're seeing these living ecosystems, right? That we're also familiar with when we go on bushwalks. We see, you know, forests and how the understory interacts with the canopy and all of that. We want people to be able to interpret that when they visit a site like this. So, for instance, seeing the man-made cove, we want, you know, shellfish to be self-seeding eventually. We want people to understand the health of shellfish is a direct relation to, you know, the pollution of the city. So hoping that this kind of project and its proximity to the city kind of reintroduces people to those natural concepts or those natural systems again. Yeah.
This question about the financial structure is as part of the site is developed in looks like offices or housing or something like that. Is the profit from that being used to help pay for the green part, or is there any relationship at all? Is it just two separate parts?
Yeah. They will pay for, or they will help pay for the park for sure. There's also a lot of different other kind of approaches that we're looking at. So it is a public-private partnership. So we are wanting to obviously get money through some of the parcels of land, but there's also an aspect of the project that we're trying to develop this into a non-profit to be able to accept some of the government funding or other donations from people that want to put their mark on site. There's quite a few projects within the states that are set up like this that can accept large donations, which, you know, if you're trying to build a park of this scale, you really need that extra bit of dosh to make it kind of worthwhile. And currently in New Zealand, there isn't a model where there's a park set up as a non-profit. So, you know, that's that kind of exchange of knowledge between North America and New Zealand. Is we're trying to be influenced by that nature of approaching a project, and then of, you know, creating a non-profit, accepting donations and funding from large donors. You know, there's that Jeff Bezos Earth Fund. If you present a project like this to him, he's probably going to throw a few million at it. There's many other kind of funding rounds. That whole kind of commercial aspect to a project like that is something that New Zealand is trying to learn more about, and help create these like much more engaging parks and entities. But yeah, it's that exchange which is really cool about this project. So we're also learning from a North American point of view, of how to potentially engage with First Nations in a meaningful way.
I've got a question for you, Tama. And I asked this half out of personal curiosity, but also out of trying to get some of these guys to think about potentially, you know, working internationally. So can you tell us a bit about how you kind of transitioned from New Zealand into going straight to New York City, how you found kind of professional practice, how you kind of settled with that, and then what's it like coming back working in New Zealand again?
Yeah, so I worked for a couple of years after I graduated in New Zealand, just at an architecture firm, so a multidisciplinary firm. We had architects, landscape architects, urban designers. There's about 200 of us. I worked there for a couple of years, and I kind of just got bored of my city I studied in, and so I quit. Well, I didn't quit. I handed in my resignation, my 2 weeks or whatever. It was actually 2 months. And then I just bought a one-way ticket to New York. I thought, you know what, it would be pretty cool to live in one of the biggest, craziest cities in the world, and just say that I've done it. So went to New York without a without a job in mind. I didn't know anyone, but it was kind of like, if all else fails, can always go back home. So if there's a place in your mind that you want to go work, like, just go for it. If obviously you have to save up, but yeah, I would say just go for it, because you never know what opportunities open up. I kind of worked in an engineering firm to begin with in New York for about a year, and realized, you know what, engineering firms are a bit stale and a bit dry. Kind of wasn't really leaning towards the side that I kind of enjoyed from my previous practice. So I ended up applying for SCAPE, which kind of was a bit more aligned with kind of my values. And then here I am today. I stayed in New York for about 4 years, working there. And then I didn't actually get my visa to extended to stay there. So I didn't really have a choice but to pack up and then come back to this side of the world. But what was really great was I kind of built a personal relationship with Kate Orth, the boss there, and she was really interested in exploring projects around the Pacific Rim, and I just so happened to know a couple of people in New Zealand that got this project on the ground. So I was able to keep my job remotely, and that's why I still work for SCAPE on this side of the world. It's a bit lonely, remote working by yourself, but it pays the bills. So yeah.
Other questions, guys?
You guys must want to know something about this project.
Even about working at SCAPE. I'm sure some of you have got that on your to-do list at some point.
Yeah, what year are you guys? Sorry, I forgot.
We have second, third, fifth, and a couple of master's students. The fourth years are out on field work today, unfortunately.
Yeah.
To be fair, Gina Worth talked to the third year students on yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yes, about the town branch project in Lexington,
Yeah.
Kentucky, and the Chattahoochee Riverlands project.
Oh, awesome, awesome.
I didn't realize we were going to have such a heavy presence of SCAPE this week, but this is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last chance, guys. Jack, got anything?
Sean, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I forgot about you. Yep, go for it.
Hi, everybody. So I was wondering, given the kind of design process that you've done and indigenous knowledge that you're really, you know, tapping into, is there any of that kind of continuing aside from the design process? So with things like the fact that there's a nursery, are there specific practices like agricultural practices or something, like with the mussels? Because, there are definitely very particular practices, I guess, related to some of that, at least on the North American kind of and I'm assuming likewise there. So that was one question. And then the other one, I'm curious about the zigzag path and the reasoning behind that. But the first one is the more kind of important question I had.
Yeah. So the first question, I guess, part of that vision and framework was just identifying things that we could then break out into different work streams. So, say for instance, the nursery will kind of be siloed off into its kind of own work stream where we'll bring in specialists for that, or making sure we have certain people involved that can help facilitate that practice moving forward, like starting to establish a working group and stuff that's focused on building up the capacity and who works here, who runs it, who's on the ground, how many people do we need employed, what does that look like in terms of like a payment structure and working all that. So that kind of gets pushed to a different work stream, and then likewise with the marine restoration area. So we're tapping into the local universities and some of their ecology and students and stuff like that, and they're partnering up with a place called NIWA, which is like a government funded, I guess they're like a marine research entity. So they're partnering up, and they're actually going to spearhead some of those marine trials on that site and continue that place as kind of a testing point within the Auckland harbour to do a lot of their shellfish testing to see whether certain species react better to improving that water quality, et cetera, yeah. And then the second question was the zigzag path. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm
I
curious.
would take the plan sketch that was presented and the renders and everything with a grain of salt. This is just the vision and framework phase, so we're basically just planting those different components in certain areas, but very much so the design still needs to be refined. There probably will not be a zigzag path, and there won't
Okay.
be such hard straight lines everywhere as we work through concept design. It was just we basically developed the plan and all these renders and stuff just to have stuff to respond to for the meeting, so people could start getting excited about site and stuff like that.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah. But you can search the project maybe at the end of this year and it will look probably quite a bit different.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Okay.
You talk a little bit about how you got the First Nations people involved in the project. Were they hesitant? Were they suspicious? Were they reluctant to express ideas? What kinds of strategies did you use to engage them?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question, actually. There were some players in the room that were definitely hesitant. I think, given their kind of past relationships with government entities and the way they've been treated, it's fair enough too. So yeah, we did have, I guess in our initial kind of meetings and stuff, it was really important to turn up and just listen, right? To not, I think the biggest thing that built trust with them was having the international architect come to the or landscape architect come to the room without a sketch, because this was a design competition to begin with. So it was our kind of conglomerate versus two others. So there was a short list of three. I think there was Michael van Valkenburg and Nelson Birdwaltz, is it? Yeah. So every other kind of international person turned up with a pretty refined sketch at the first meeting, and we turned up with nothing. And they were actually really impressed with that, because that was the whole point of engagement with them, right? Was that there wasn't a design yet. You needed to have that dialogue and those conversations to be able to have something that actually means something to them. So I guess, yeah, building that trust with nothing was kind of a bit jarring for us, coming from North America and the way that things are practiced on this side of in the American side. But I think they were really receptive to that, and it showed a lot of respect, turning up without a design at the get-go.
Do you think it was
Yeah.
useful, you acting as kind of like a mediator, a bridge between worldviews? Was that a helpful aspect of that?
Yeah, somewhat. I feel like, well, I do have an Indigenous background too in New Zealand, so that did help bridge the kind of whole international aspect of, hey, we've got an outsider coming in, telling us what we should design, but then seeing me in the room and I'm able to speak the same language. I'm able to introduce my boss, Kate from America, but I had that grounding element too. Like, I'm obviously from New Zealand as well, so I think that did help a lot. But I think the most part is just being a nice human being, right? Like, if you turn up and you're willing to listen to their stories and willing to listen to their concerns, then that's the first step. Being able to be engaged when you're going on those site walks. I think walking the land with these groups is really important. So making the time to pay them for their expertise as well is important. Trying to encourage them, hey, can we go for a walk around site? It would be really nice to learn, anything that you're willing to share. Just being really open to that, starting that dialogue and starting that relationship, right? I think it's like more about thinking about how do we create an ongoing relationship with this group of people, rather than thinking, hey, we've got to deal with these consultants and we've got to tick XYZ with them. It's about creating a friendship, really.
All right, let's give Tama a big round of applause. These very early Tama, for waking up so damn early to speak with us. It's like 5:30 there at the moment.
Yeah, AM.
Yeah.
So sorry if I was a bit slow.
So I really appreciate it. I mean, it's been great hearing from you. And flick me an email next time you're over in North America planned, that this time zone, and we might be able to try and line something else up as well.
Yeah, for sure. And to all the students, if you guys want to ask any questions about practicing, or you're interested in learning more about SCAPE, we do have an internship program, which you're welcome to apply for. You can feel free to add me on LinkedIn or whatever and ask me questions, or if you want someone to have a quick look over your portfolio or whatever, feel free. So yeah, cheers.
Right. Thank you very much. Catch you later next time, Tama.
Thank you.
Ka kite. See you guys.